A heartbroken millionaire CEO driving through a stormy night witnesses something unimaginable. A young woman abandoning her twin babies in the woods. But instead of turning away, he chooses to save them. What begins as an act of instinct turns into a journey of healing, redemption, and second chances. As he raises the children and uncovers the truth about their mother's pain, a broken family slowly finds its way back to love, forgiveness, and home. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. What would you have done that night? And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that heal and inspire. The rain had begun its descent like a slow-breathing storm, whispering against the windshield of Logan Montgomery's sleek black SUV as he drove with no destination in mind. The hour was late, 1 a.m., and the city behind him had faded into mighty silence. He didn't hear his assistant's voice through the speakerphone ask, "Sir, where are you going?" Not at first. His hands were clenched on the steering wheel, his eyes locked forward through the murk of fog and rain. "Anywhere but here," he muttered, low and hollow. His assistant paused. "Should I call Dr. Mayers?" But Logan had already ended the call, the soft electronic click final. He didn't need a doctor. What he needed, he couldn't name. Not anymore. The road twisted ahead, surrounded by towering trees that swayed in the wind like silent witnesses to his unraveling. The storm had begun to intensify, sheets of rain pelting down, the forest road vanishing into the mist ahead. Wipers screeched back and forth, but he barely noticed. His mind was playing a different reel, one it had played for almost 2 years. Shattered glass, a child's scream, the screech of twisting metal, then silence. Always the silence. In that silence lived the last image of his wife's smile, fading in the rearview mirror. Their daughter, 5 years old, was in the back seat, laughing as she reached for a red balloon. The truck had come too fast, too wide around a corner. Everything had happened in an instant. The aftermath, however, had stretched into eternity. Logan pressed his foot harder on the accelerator. The forest was familiar. He'd driven this road hundreds of times in another life. Back when birthdays meant celebration, back when he believed in tomorrow. But tonight it all felt foreign, like a memory trying to slip away. And then just ahead through the blur of rain and fog, he saw something. A figure, small, hunched, moving between the trees like a ghost. His foot eased off the gas, and the headlights caught the shape. A young woman soaking wet, her blonde hair matted against her face, carrying something bundled tightly in each arm. She looked like she'd been walking for miles. Logan's breath caught. She was moving with urgency, not panic, but purpose. She reached a gnarled ancient tree at the edge of the road, knelt down and carefully laid the bundles at its roots. Rain poured down over her as she leaned forward and kissed each bundle softly on the forehead. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Even through the downpour, Logan could hear her voice. "Please survive." Then she stood. Her shoulders shook, but before he could fully comprehend what was happening, she turned and disappeared into the woods. Logan slammed the SUV into park, flung the door open and ran into the storm. "Wait!" he shouted. His voice cut through the night air like a knife. She paused, just a flicker of movement, but then she ran. Her silhouette vanished among the trees, swallowed by mist and rain and shadow. "What are you doing?" Logan yelled again, stumbling through wet underbrush and mud trying to follow. "Come back!" But there was no answer, only the wind. He pushed forward, branches slapping against his face, shoes sinking into thick earth, until the forest swallowed every trace of her. No footprints, no sound, no warmth. She was gone. The rain intensified. It soaked through his jacket, plastering his shirt to his skin. He stood still for a moment, catching his breath, his heart thudding loudly in the quiet of the woods. Then he turned back toward the tree. 2 small bundles lay nestled in the roots, barely moving. He knelt down slowly, hands trembling. The blankets were soaked through, but he peeled them back carefully, not knowing what to expect. Inside were 2 infants, twins. They couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Their tiny lips were pale, their eyes shut tight against the cold. One gave a soft whimper. The other didn't move. A sob caught in Logan's throat. Gently he lifted both babies into his arms, pressing their tiny bodies to his chest, trying to give them what little warmth he had left. "You're okay," he whispered, not to them, but to himself. "You're okay. You're going to be okay." But he wasn't sure. His steps back to the SUV were fast and desperate. He threw open the back door, laid them carefully on the leather seats, then stripped off his coat and wrapped it around them. He cranked the heater to full and slammed the gear into drive. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get there fast. Every raindrop felt like a countdown. Every second was a heartbeat. Every breath felt like borrowed time. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The babies, drenched, tiny and silent, lay in a fragile pile of blankets and desperation, and something inside Logan cracked. He had not held a child since the funeral. He had not wanted to. But tonight, he had no choice. Tonight, someone had left behind life. And for the first time in 2 years, Logan Montgomery didn't feel like dying. He felt like saving something, maybe even himself. As his SUV pulled into the driveway of his sprawling estate, the rain had lessened to a drizzle. The mansion loomed ahead, towering and dark. The lights were dim, the silence was thick. Logan stepped out, holding the twins carefully, still wrapped in his coat. He pushed open the heavy front doors. The sound echoed into the emptiness. The babies whimpered softly. One stirred against his chest. He hesitated at the threshold. This house used to be filled with life. Now it was a tomb, but he carried them upstairs anyway. Past the grand staircase, past the silent halls, up to a room he had not dared enter in over a year. The nursery. The curtains were still pale pink, the shelves still full of fairy tales. The crib stood in the corner, its mobile still spinning slowly, stirred by air, or perhaps memory. He couldn't bring himself to lay them there. Instead, he turned to the adjacent guest room, laid out towels, gently dried their trembling bodies, fetched warm blankets from an old cedar chest, the ones with stars printed on them. His daughter's favorite. He wrapped them slowly, carefully, methodically, the same way he used to. His hands moved on instinct, memory guiding them. Once he was sure they were safe, he picked up the phone and called his private physician. "It's urgent," he said. "2 newborns, mild hypothermia. I need you here now." An hour later, the doctor arrived. The diagnosis was simple. "They'll be okay," the doctor said. "They just need warmth, rest, love." Logan didn't leave their side. He sat in the corner rocking chair, the one that hadn't moved in 2 years, watching them sleep beneath the soft light. Outside, the rain tapped against the windows like a lullaby. His mind wandered back to that night, his birthday. His wife had picked up their daughter from piano lessons. Balloons in the back seat, a cake on her lap. He remembered the voicemail, his daughter singing happy birthday, slightly off-key, full of giggles. Then the phone call, then the silence. He had buried 2 people that night, and a part of himself. 2. But tonight, That silence had been broken by the faintest cry. In the darkest woods, and instead of running from it, Logan had answered. He didn't know what came next, but for the first time in forever, he wanted to. He looked at the girl twin, soft, hair-fragile fingers. A word entered his mind: hope. Then at the boy, lips parted, chest rising and falling. Ray. Hope and Ray. His whisper was barely audible. You're safe now. And in the hush of the rain and the steady hum of breath beside him, Logan Montgomery began to feel alive again. The sun began to creep over the horizon, casting a dim amber glow through the rain-spotted windows of the guest room. Logan sat perfectly still in the worn rocking chair, one hand resting lightly on the blanket covering the twins. His muscles ached from staying in the same position all night, but he didn't move. His gaze remained fixed on the sleeping infants. Hope let out a soft sigh. Ray shifted and curled his tiny fingers around the edge of the blanket. It was the first sunrise in 2 years that Logan Montgomery watched without feeling hollow inside. At precisely 6:32 a.m., the household staff arrived, quiet, well-trained, and observant. They were used to Logan's absences, his long silences, and his refusal to open certain doors. But when Marion, the head housekeeper, stepped into the foyer and noticed Logan's coat dripping near the entrance, she paused. Something had shifted. She tiptoed upstairs, curious and cautious. When she found the guest room door open and Logan seated beside 2 newborns, her breath caught. She said nothing. Logan looked up, his eyes bloodshot but strangely calm. We'll need formula, diapers, bottles, blankets. Marion nodded slowly, blinking back tears she didn't fully understand. I'll handle it, sir. He looked back at the babies. And someone gentle for them. They shouldn't be alone. Within 2 hours, the estate transformed. The same house that had gone untouched for so long now smelled faintly of warmed milk and lavender wipes. Logan hadn't changed out of his clothes, nor had he slept, but he moved with intention. He oversaw every detail: the temperature of the bottles, the detergent used on the sheets, the softness of the new blankets. By the time the doctor returned for a follow-up check, both babies had color in their cheeks. They're fighters, she remarked, listening to Ray's heartbeat. Whatever they went through, they're strong. Logan nodded. His voice, when he finally spoke, was almost a whisper. They have to be. The days blurred into each other. Logan stayed home, canceling meetings and appointments without explanation. His assistant was used to vague disappearances and cryptic rescheduling, but even she was beginning to worry. Sir, the board is requesting a video call. No, but I said no. He hung up, then turned back to the twins. They had begun to respond to him, Hope with wide, curious eyes, and Ray with tiny, content sighs when he was picked up. Logan studied every sound, every breath. He read infant care manuals late into the night. He placed a crib in the guest room, but couldn't bring himself to move them into the old nursery. Not yet. That room was still sacred, untouched, like a grave. Instead, he remained in the guest room, sometimes falling asleep with one of the babies on his chest, the flickering nightlight casting soft shadows over the walls. He didn't smile. Not yet. But he didn't cry either, and that was something. One evening, as he was gently rocking Hope to sleep, her hand brushed his chest, right over the scar tissue where his seatbelt had once bruised his ribs. He froze. Her tiny fingers clung there for a second, then relaxed. He whispered, "You don't know how broken I am." She sighed in her sleep, peaceful. "But maybe you will help me remember." It was that same night, after both twins had finally fallen asleep, that Logan sat in his study. The lights dimmed low and stared at a file on his laptop. He had spent the last few nights going over security footage from the dashcam in his SUV, enhanced clips from traffic cameras, and timestamps from when he had seen the woman in the woods. There were hours missing, but his brain kept circling the same question. Who was she? He reached out to someone he had used before, a private investigator named Will Carson. Discreet, efficient. Will had once helped track down an embezzling CFO without leaving a single trace of corporate drama. This request, however, was personal. "I want to find someone," Logan said over the encrypted call. "She left 2 infants in the woods during the storm." There was a pause. "Do you want to press charges?" Logan hesitated. "I don't know yet." "Then what do you want?" "Her name, her story, and whether she's dangerous. I'll need dashcam footage, date, time, location. I'll send everything." He did. Every clip, every detail, every hunch. And then, for the first time in weeks, Logan stepped out of the room and left his phone behind. The twins were growing stronger. They had begun making noises. Not cries, not yet. Giggles, just the experimental sounds of life testing its voice. Marion brought in a nanny named Elise, soft-spoken and full of gentle laughter. Logan allowed her to assist only when he was in the room. "I'll handle it," he'd say every time she reached for a bottle. But he was grateful. The first time. He saw Hope's eyes open fully, their blue hue striking against her pale skin. He felt something bloom inside him, something he couldn't name. He watched as Ray clumsily tried to hold a rattle and then drop it, his little brow furrowed in frustration. "They're alive," he murmured one afternoon, sitting in the garden. "Not just breathing, alive." It was Marion who replied, her voice soft and maternal. "And so are you," he didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. Will called back 3 days later. "I found her." Logan's grip on the phone tightened. "Who is she?" "Name's Emily Rowan. Registered under an alias at a shelter, Rachel D. The shelter's on the edge of the city, old converted church. She checked in 2 nights ago. Matches the facial recognition from your dash cam." Logan closed his eyes. "Is she alone?" "Yes. No criminal record, no drugs in the system. But..." Will hesitated. "She's been through hell, black eyes, healing ribs. She's listed as a domestic abuse victim." Silence. Logan's mind ran through every image of her. The soaked figure, the whispered apology, the trembling hands. Desperation, not cruelty. "Do you want to press charges?" Will asked again. Logan answered with a question of his own. "Is she a threat to them?" "No, I don't think so. I think she tried to save them in the only way she thought she could." Logan hung up without another word. The next morning before sunrise he drove. He didn't tell Marion, didn't tell Elise, didn't even leave a note, he just left. The shelter was modest. 2 floors, cracked white paint, a wrought iron gate with a broken latch. Logan stood at the door for a long moment, staring at the buzzer. When the counselor answered, she was wary. "Can I help you? I'm looking for someone, Emily Rowan." The counselor's eyes narrowed. "Are you with the court?" "No." "Police?" "No." "Then why are you here?" "I saw her leave 2 babies in the woods." A beat of silence. "She's in the garden." Logan nodded. He stepped through the hallway. Faded photos of survivors on the walls, muted laughter from children in the background, and walked out into the back garden. And there she was, sitting alone on a wooden bench, shoulders hunched, a grey blanket draped over her. In her arms, a faded pink cloth doll missing one eye. She rocked it slowly as if it were breathing, Logan's footsteps crunched on gravel. She looked up. Recognition hit her like a slap. She clutched the doll tightly and stood backing away. Logan raised a hand. "Don't run." She froze. He stepped closer, his jaw clenched. "How could you leave them in the rain, in the cold? What kind of mother?" She collapsed back onto the bench, tears already falling. "I didn't want to," she choked. "I had no choice." Logan stared at her. Emily's eyes shimmered with something raw. She clutched the doll like it was life itself. "You don't know what it was like," she whispered. "He would have killed them." The rest came out like a flood, broken, breathless. 3 years with a man who changed when the drugs took hold. The beatings, the isolation, the threats. How he locked her in a bathroom and held her babies by the window and threatened to drop them. "I thought if I left them where someone kind would find them, they might live." Logan sat down beside her. "You never reported it?" She shook her head. "I was afraid. I thought if I told anyone, they'd be taken away. Or worse, he'd find us again." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I came back," she whispered, "an hour later, but they were gone." She curled into herself, hands trembling around the doll. Logan looked at her, not as a monster, not as someone careless, but as a woman who had tried and failed and tried again, someone who had risked everything for a shred of safety. He exhaled, long and slow, and for the first time, he said her name. "Emily." She turned to him, startled. "You saw them, didn't you?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Are they alive? Please, are they safe?" He stared into her eyes. He wanted to tell her yes, but his voice came out flat, cold. "I'm not the one who found them." She flinched, her hope shattered like glass on concrete. She turned away, sobbing. "Into her hands," I thought. Maybe. Logan stood, then left. He didn't sleep that night. He saw her face every time he closed his eyes, the hope, the ache, the quiet strength of a woman broken but still breathing. She had made a mistake, but she had come back. That counted for something. He didn't know what it meant yet, but it meant something. The next morning, Logan sat on the edge of his bed, fully dressed, his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together. The sun had just begun its slow climb above the skyline, spilling soft gold over the mansion's east windows. The house was quiet, but not empty. Not anymore. Down the hall, soft baby sounds echoed from the guest room. Marion had already been in to check on the twins, her footsteps soft and rhythmic like clockwork. Elise, ever gentle, was humming faintly as she warmed formula in the kitchen downstairs. But Logan's mind wasn't in that house. It was still in the garden of the shelter, sitting beside Emily as she trembled beneath the grey morning sky. He hadn't slept. He hadn't tried. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the raw ache in her face, the tremble of her fingers wrapped around that limp cloth doll, the soft pleading in her voice when she asked, "Are they safe?" He had lied. It wasn't intentional. Cruelty. He told himself that. But it was still a lie. He had looked a grieving mother in the eye and denied her the one thing that might have kept her breathing through another day: hope. He rubbed his temples. His body was exhausted, but his heart was worse, splintered and split between instinct and understanding. Protecting the twins had become his reason to exist. But he couldn't shake the truth in Emily's eyes. She wasn't a monster. She was a mother who had done the unthinkable, because she believed it was her only chance to save them, and now she was sitting alone in a shelter, barely holding herself together. Logan stood and walked to the nursery. He opened the door and stepped inside. It was the same as it had always been, untouched since the funeral. Pale yellow walls, soft mobiles, picture books untouched on the shelf, a rocking chair in the corner that had only ever been used once. He looked around, then turned back to the hall and walked into the guest room. Hope was awake, blinking up at Elise with wide, curious eyes. Ray was already trying to chew on the edge of a blanket. Elise looked up as Logan entered. "They're good," she said softly. "Warm, clean, and loud when they want to be." Logan smiled faintly. "Thanks." He moved to the crib and knelt. Beside it, Hope reached for him. Ray gurgled, lifting his small arms with a whimper. He picked them both up, and one in each arm, and held them against his chest. "They fit there perfectly now, like puzzle pieces long missing," he whispered. "She's not gone, she's still out there." Elise tilted her head. "Who?" He didn't answer. That afternoon he made the first phone call. It wasn't to Emily. Not yet. Instead, it was to one of the top trauma therapists in the city, Dr. Margaret Llewellyn. Quiet, discreet, specialized in PTSD and long-term emotional recovery. "She's in a shelter," Logan explained. "No income, no support, but she's not just some charity case, she's their mother." "I understand," Margaret said. "Can you see her?" "I'll contact the shelter anonymously, set it up as a referral from a donor. She can't know it's from me." "She won't." "Thank you." He hung up, then sat in silence. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was something over. The next few weeks, Logan worked behind the scenes. He used old connections to secure a part-time position for Emily at a local library in a quiet part of the city. The job was simple: shelving books, assisting with story time, helping prep snacks for the afternoon readers. He paid for everything without ever stepping forward. She didn't know he was watching, but he was. He visited the library occasionally, standing between the non-fiction shelves, pretending to read cookbooks while watching her from a distance. At first, she was a ghost, her hair always down, face hidden, voice barely above a whisper. She flinched when doors slammed. She avoided eye contact, but children didn't ask questions, they just smiled, and slowly, Emily began to smile back. It wasn't dramatic. There was no moment of epiphany. But day by day, she stood straighter. She hummed when shelving books. She laughed in once, during reading hour, and it had startled even her. She wore her hair up one day. The scar near her temple had faded. Another day, Logan saw her sit in the garden behind the library with a notebook. In her lap, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She was sketching something. He couldn't see what, but her brow was furrowed with focus, not fear. He felt something warm swell in his chest. Still, he said nothing, until one rainy afternoon. Logan was leaning against a shelf, answering an email on his phone, when Emily walked past carrying a stack of picture books. Her eyes flicked toward him, then toward the phone in his hand, and she froze. She dropped the books. They hit the carpet with a soft thud. Her lips parted. Her voice came out in a breathless whisper. "That's them, isn't it?" Logan looked up, Oni. The screen was a photo. Hope and Ray sitting in a field of dandelions. Ray had a milk mustache. Hope had a yellow flower tucked behind her ear. Their eyes met. He had no words. Emily's knees buckled, but she steadied herself against the shelf. "You lied," she said, voice shaking. "I had to," he replied quietly. She stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Logan didn't follow. He let her go. That night, he didn't sleep again. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tap against the window panes. He thought of the way her face had crumpled, not in anger but in ache. She hadn't yelled, she hadn't demanded. She had simply looked, and in that look was all the proof he had ever needed that her love had never left. The next morning, Logan got into his car and drove to the library. He waited outside until her shift ended. She saw him and froze again. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "Then why? Come with me." "Where?" "My home." She hesitated. "I'm not going to press charges," he added gently. Her shoulders sagged. "I just want you to see something." The drive was quiet. Emily sat stiffly, her hands clenched in her lap. The seatbelt looked like a restraint. Her breath came shallow. As the gates of Logan's estate opened, she stared out the window. She had expected coldness, marble and steel and silence. But instead she saw light, warm windows, a garden with flowers, children's drawings taped to the glass. He led her inside. She followed him past the grand staircase, past rooms she couldn't name, to a hallway lined with framed photos, not of luxury or power, but of childhood. Finger paintings, crayon stick figures, blurry snapshots of tiny hands. Her steps slowed. Logan stopped in front of a door. When he opened it, her world shifted. The nursery, soft yellow walls, stuffed animals, 2 matching beds with star-stitched quilts, and in the center, Hope, holding a plush bear nearly her size, Ray cradled in a nanny's arms, a bottle half empty in his tiny grip. They were alive, they were safe, they were laughing. Emily dropped to her knees, she covered her mouth with both hands. "My babies." Hope looked up, blinking curiously. Ray followed. Emily didn't move, she just stared, as if afraid that if she blinked they would disappear. Logan knelt beside her. "They've been cared for, loved, protected." He hesitated. "But I've always known something was missing." Emily turned to him, eyes brimming. "I thought I lost them forever." He took her hand. "They don't just need a home," he whispered. "They need their mother." And for the first time in years, Emily, Rowan let herself believe she could be one again. The mansion was no longer a house filled with echoes. It was changing, slowly, gently, day by day. The transformation didn't come with a loud moment or a single dramatic scene. It came with mornings that started with tiny footsteps down the hallway, with the sound of cereal being poured into mismatched bowls, with the giggle of a toddler running through the foyer in socks that never matched. Hope and Ray were now part of the air, the rhythm, the life of the home. Emily moved in, not as a guest, but as a piece that had been missing, a thread that pulled the fabric together. She didn't ask questions when she was shown to a newly furnished room. She didn't look for grand explanations. Instead, she looked for her children. Every moment with them felt sacred. The first time Hope fell asleep in her arms, Emily cried so silently that even Logan didn't notice, not until she wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater and whispered, "I don't deserve this." But Logan didn't respond. He didn't need to. His presence beside her was enough. One evening after dinner, simple spaghetti with far too much sauce smeared across Ray's face, Emily sat on the floor of the sunroom with the twins curled in her lap. Logan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching the 3 of them. His gaze lingered not just on the children but on her. Her smile was different now, not wide or loud, but real, stronger. It reminded him of someone rebuilding a melody. From broken notes, Elise had transitioned quietly into more of a helper than a nanny. Emily took over with ease, not perfect, not polished, but instinctive. She kissed scraped knees, sang lullabies while folding laundry, and learned to braid Hope's hair in uneven pigtails. The home had color now, not in paint, but in presence. Logan began working again. Not full-time, not yet, but in pieces. Morning meetings from the home office, evening walks in the garden with a phone in his pocket that he no longer stared at every minute. He watched Emily thrive. She didn't just mother, she created. Every night after the twins fell asleep, she would sit in the sunroom with a blanket over her lap, a cup of tea cooling beside her, and a notebook in her hands. She scribbled in it quietly for hours. Logan never asked what she was writing, not until one afternoon when she left the book open and stepped away to answer a call. He glanced at the pages, sketches, lines of dialogue, rough titles and crossings out and fragments of prose. He read the first sentence. Once upon a night, 2 stars got lost in the dark, and a man who had forgotten how to look up found them. When she returned, she found him standing beside the notebook. I didn't mean to, he started. It's okay, she said. They stood in silence for a beat. I'm not sure it's a story yet, she added. I think it already is, he said. Months passed. Spring arrived. With it came long afternoons in the garden, toy trucks half buried in flower beds, chalk drawings on the patio stones, and dandelion wishes tossed into the wind. Logan found himself laughing more, softly, unexpectedly. The twins' 3rd birthday approached. Emily didn't want anything extravagant. They don't need a castle, just a backyard and paper hats. Logan smiled. You'll get both. On the morning of their birthday, the garden was transformed. Strings of lights hung between trees. Paper lanterns swayed in the breeze. Small table held a cake shaped like a fairy tale castle, surrounded by fruit slices and sandwiches cut into stars. Hope wore a paper crown and a dress that glittered in the sun. Ray wore overalls and had frosting on his nose before the first gift was unwrapped. Guests arrived. Neighbors, a few close colleagues of Logan's, children from the library where Emily still volunteered part-time. Emily stood by the trellis, a simple cream dress flowing around her, her hair in a soft braid. Her eyes shimmered, not with sadness but with something steadier, something earned. Peace. Logan watched her from the far side of the garden. He was holding a tray of lemonade, pretending to be busy, but really he was just looking, memorizing. She caught his gaze and smiled. He walked over and stood beside her. They look happy, she whispered. They are. There was a pause. Then, almost like it had been planned, the clouds parted and a soft spring rain began to fall. Not heavy, not cold. Just a mist of silver. Some guests laughed and ran for cover. Others turned their faces to the sky. Emily stepped forward, arms out, letting the rain touch her skin. Hope shrieked with delight and ran toward her, Ray close behind, giggling. They collided with her legs and hugged her tightly. She dropped to her knees and wrapped them in her arms, kissing their wet heads. Nearby, Rick, Logan's old friend and former colleague, watched with quiet reverence. He stood beside his own daughter, a little older now, wearing a tutu and spinning in the grass. He stepped closer and said to Emily, "They gave us another life. We just had to be brave enough to live it." Emily turned to him. Her eyes were full. "We almost didn't," she said. Rick nodded. Almost. As the evening faded and guests trickled away, Logan, Emily, Hope, and Ray sat beneath the old pear tree on the wooden bench. Lanterns flickered above them. The garden smelled of earth and sugar and something undefinable, like renewal. Hope, curled into Emily's lap. Ray leaned against Logan's chest. Emily whispered, "Do you ever think we were all just waiting to find each other?" Logan brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "I think we were the light at the end of each other's storm." They sat in silence. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. The garden had grown quiet after the celebration. Paper lanterns still swayed in the soft breeze, and faint laughter seemed to linger in the air like perfume. Inside the mansion, the twins had been tucked into bed, their cheeks still sticky from frosting and joy. Emily sat by the window in the nursery, her knees pulled up to her chest, a soft blanket draped around her shoulders. The house was no longer foreign to her. It didn't creak with ghosts, it breathed with life. Every hallway echoed with memories made only weeks ago, yet they felt like they had always been there. Logan passed by the doorway, pausing briefly to look in on her. She didn't speak. He didn't either. He simply leaned against the doorframe, the light from the hallway catching the edges of his face. There was peace between them now, not loud or urgent, but mutual and unspoken. It lived in shared glances, small gestures, the way she handed him a mug of coffee before he asked, or how he folded Hope's blanket just the way Emily liked. Later that evening, after the twins were fast asleep and the house wrapped itself in quiet, Logan sat in the study, flipping through a folder filled with new photographs. Hope learning to balance on one foot, Ray proudly holding a half-eaten sandwich, Emily laughing under a blanket fort. He placed one of the photos on the desk and just stared at it. For a long time. His phone buzzed. An email. It was from Emily. The subject line. Finished it. The message simply read, "When light found us." The final draft is in the attachment. Logan downloaded the file and opened it. He read the first page, then the second and the third. The story followed two tiny stars that got lost in the night. They drifted through shadows, quiet and scared, until a man with a broken telescope found them. He couldn't see clearly, not at first, but something in his chest recognized them. He gave them warmth. He gave them names. And as he began to look up again, the stars began to glow brighter. Together they searched for the light that had given them life, and eventually they found her, the third star. The one who had whispered their names into the dark and let them go so they could survive. The story wasn't just fiction. It was memory, disguised in metaphor and moonlight. Logan finished the final paragraph and closed his eyes. The next morning, he contacted a small publishing house he had once supported through charity work. By the end of the week, they had accepted the manuscript. 2 months later, the book was printed in soft colors with silver stars etched on the cover. Emily's name was written across the bottom in quiet lettering, Emily Rowan. She didn't know how to react the first time she held the printed copy. She ran her fingers over the paper like it was fragile glass. Then she looked up at Logan. "You made this happen." He shook his head. "You wrote it. I just turned the lights on." The book received modest praise. Nothing viral, but it spread slowly through parenting blogs, libraries, a few support groups. One school invited Emily to speak. She turned them down. Then, after a week of thinking about it, she changed her mind. Logan drove her there. She sat in front of a group of children, hands trembling at first, but as she read the story, her voice steadied. A little girl in the front row raised her hand. "Were you the third star?" Emily's voice caught. She smiled softly. "I think I was, but sometimes we're all three." Afterward, she and Logan walked through the school garden. He glanced at her. "You were incredible. I was terrified. You didn't look it, she laughed lightly, then paused. I never thought I'd be someone worth listening to. You always were, you just needed a louder pen. They walked on in silence. That night, back at the mansion, the twins climbed into their beds as usual, but Hope clutched the book tightly to her chest. Can we read it again? She asked. Emily looked at Logan. He nodded. She sat between their beds and read aloud. Her voice was soft, lyrical. Logan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, heart full. Every word from the book echoed in his chest like a heartbeat rediscovered. When she finished, both children were asleep, and she gently kissed their foreheads. Later that night in the study, she pulled out her notebook. I started the next book, she said, flipping it open. Logan raised an eyebrow. Title? The House That Learned. To laugh, he smiled. Sounds familiar. It's about a big house, she said, that used to be scared of noise until two little lights moved in, and one big quiet man who didn't know he had a heart anymore. He chuckled. I think I like this one already. She looked at him, her expression soft. I thought I was done with life, Logan said suddenly. With love. I thought what happened to me meant the end of everything that mattered. Emily reached out and took his hand. It wasn't the end, she said. It was just a dark place. And sometimes the light doesn't find us right away. Sometimes we have to become the one who walks toward it. He looked at her, really looked, not at the woman who had left her babies behind, but the woman who had come back, who had clawed her way out of shame, fear, and silence, and into the arms of her children. The mansion no longer echoed with loss. It pulsed with warmth, the soft thud of toddler footsteps, the scribble of crayon on wallpaper that no one cleaned, the quiet rhythmic turning of notebook pages, and Logan, once hollow, now filled with something more. Not just hope, but home. Summer came slowly to the estate, arriving not with fireworks or fanfare, but with warmth that soaked into the stones of the garden paths, and the laughter that echoed from the kitchen window. Inside the mansion, the days unfolded with a rhythm as natural as breathing. Mornings began with Hope announcing that the sun was awake again, and Ray insisting on wearing mismatched shoes. Pancakes burned occasionally, spoons were dropped, tiny feet raced through the halls. The quiet that once blanketed the home like grief had been replaced with joyful chaos. Logan had become someone new, not unrecognizable, but rediscovered. He still kept his routines, still read the paper with coffee, still walked the perimeter of the estate before dusk. But now he also helped tie shoelaces, cleaned up spilled juice, memorized bedtime routines, watched Emily draw pictures on the fogged kitchen windows with whipped cream. The pain hadn't vanished. Grief doesn't do that. But it had learned to live beside the joy. It had made room. One late afternoon, Emily sat on the front porch with a stack of books in her lap, her braid falling over one shoulder. Hope sat beside her with crayons, scribbling flowers in a sketch pad. Ray was in the grass with Logan, building towers of plastic blocks that fell almost as fast as they rose. Logan looked over at Emily. You know, he said, wiping his hands, I never imagined this. She glanced up. What? This porch? He smiled. No, this life. After everything. She nodded. Me neither. A breeze moved through the trees. Wind chimes sounded like soft glass laughter. Emily turned to Hope. What should we read tonight? Hope looked thoughtful. The one where the stars come back. Emily hugged her. Good choice. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Emily stood in the kitchen, sipping tea. Logan leaned against the counter, watching her. "You've changed," he said. She arched a brow. "For better or worse," he laughed. "You're stronger." "I'm healing," she corrected. "Still, you're writing again." She nodded. "I want the next book to be about the house, about how it used to be afraid of noise until 2 little storms moved in." Logan chuckled. "They are storms, aren't they?" She smiled. "And sunlight, too." 1 week later, the publishing house requested a meeting. Emily had been invited to read When Light Found Us at a literacy event. She panicked. "I'm not ready," she told Logan. "People will look at me. Ask questions. What if they guess it's real?" He sat with her on the garden bench. "You don't have to go." "But if I don't," she whispered, "it's like I'm still hiding." He didn't say anything. He just waited. She looked up at him. "Would you come with me?" "Yes." The auditorium was small, cozy. Children sat cross-legged in front rows, parents behind them, librarians, educators, a few bloggers. Emily stepped onto the stage with the book clutched to her chest, like armor. Her hands trembled slightly. Her breath came uneven. She sat on a wooden stool and opened the book. Her voice at first was soft, but by the second page, it grew. She read of the stars, the dark, the man with the broken telescope. She read of love, and letting go, and finding light again. When she finished, there was a pause, then applause. Quiet, respectful, and deeply moved. Afterward, a little boy with large glasses walked up to her. "Were you the mom in the book?" Emily knelt beside him. "What do you think?" "I think she was really brave." Emily's eyes welled. "Thank you." Back home that night, Logan stood by the window as Emily changed the twins into pajamas. She was humming something, the same lullaby she used to sing alone in the shelter garden. It sounded different now, full. Hope leaned against her, already dozing. Ray clutched his lion plush. Logan watched them and felt something he hadn't known for years: belonging. Later, as the house quieted, he and Emily sat in the sunroom, the lamp casting a warm glow on their faces. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous." She teased gently. He smiled. "I want to fund a reading program for shelters, for mothers, something small but lasting. Maybe under your name." Emily blinked. "Why mine?" "Because you found the words." She didn't respond. Instead, she leaned forward and took his hand. The gesture didn't need explanation, and Logan didn't need to speak. For once, everything was understood without being said. That night, he walked the halls alone after she went to sleep. He paused at the nursery, watched the twins through the cracked door. Then he passed the old family portrait in the hall, the one that still had his late wife and daughter in it. He stood before it quietly and whispered, "Thank you for letting me find them." He turned off the light and walked back into the present. Autumn crept into the mansion like a whispered secret, carried in with every leaf that tumbled across the garden path and every breeze that tapped gently against the windows. Inside, warmth remained, not just from the crackling fireplace in the den or the thick quilts draped over the couches, but from the people who now filled the rooms with love. Emily had taken to writing in the mornings. After the twins were dropped off at a small local preschool, where they were already adored for their mismatched socks and endless curiosity, she would return home, make a fresh cup of tea, and curl up in the window seat of the sunroom with her notebook. The second book was halfway finished. It was a story about a house, a big quiet house, that had once been afraid of noise. A house that echoed with silence and shadows until two small voices moved in, and one tired man found himself learning to laugh again. Logan read each draft she gave him slowly, thoughtfully. He made notes in the margins, not corrections, just comments. Observations like, "This line feels like forgiveness," or "I remember this day." He never told her how much those stories meant to him. He didn't have to. It was there in the way he looked at her when she read aloud, in the way he tucked Ray's lion plush under his arm just so, in the way he always seemed to notice when she needed 5 minutes to breathe. One October afternoon, Emily received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a formal invitation. A regional book award committee had shortlisted When Light Found Us for debut children's book of the year. The ceremony was to be held in the city's historic theatre, a grand gilded place with velvet seats and a marble staircase. Emily stared at the invitation for a long time. Then she handed it to Logan. "I'm not sure I belong in a room like that." He read it carefully. "Of course you do." She shook her head. "You don't understand. I'm still the woman who left her babies in the woods." Logan reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "No," he said. "You're the woman who came back." She didn't speak, but she didn't argue. The night of the award ceremony arrived with unexpected calm. Emily wore a soft navy blue dress, her hair pinned back with small silver stars. Hope had chosen the pin herself. "Because Mommy is like the night sky," she'd said, "all glowing and safe." Logan wore his usual suit, understated, clean. His tie, however, was crooked, a detail that made Emily smile when she fixed it at the front door. "You nervous?" he asked. "Terrified." "Good. That means it matters." They left the twins, with Marion and Elise, who had insisted on throwing them a tiny pajama party while their parents were away. The theater was stunning. Chandeliers sparkled like constellations overhead. People milled about in tailored suits and elegant dresses, sipping wine and murmuring in low, reverent tones. Emily stayed close to Logan. She nodded politely when introduced to editors and agents, smiled softly when someone mentioned how her story had helped their child sleep better at night. But it wasn't until she was seated in the velvet chair, her name on a program folded in her lap, that the weight of it all settled in. From the stage, a woman in a silver gown read excerpts from the nominated books. When she reached When Light Found Us, her voice softened. She read the scene where the stars are found by the man with the broken telescope. There was a hush in the room. Emily couldn't breathe. Then they announced the winner. It wasn't her. The applause still echoed. The winner took the stage with poise and gave a polished speech. But Emily felt only relief. She leaned toward Logan. "I'm okay." He smiled. "I know." On the drive home they said little, but their silence was comfortable. Back at the mansion, the twins were fast asleep on the rug, wrapped in blankets, cartoons still flickering softly on the television. Emily sat on the couch, pulling off her shoes. Logan returned with 2 mugs of tea. "You didn't win," he said. She shook her head. "But you changed lives," he added. She looked at him, really looked. "Including yours." He met her gaze. "Especially mine." That night they stood side by side at the window, watching the leaves fall gently outside. "I have an idea," she said. "Oh?" "A 3rd book." He waited. "This one's not about stars or houses," she said. "It's about 2 tiny sparks and a woman who thought she lost them. But they found her again, and she had to learn how to love herself through their eyes." Logan didn't reply. He just reached for her hand. In the quiet that followed, Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. Outside, the trees swayed. Inside, the mansion breathed, and for the first time in a long, long time, nothing felt missing. Winter came quietly that year. There were no heavy snows, no sudden storms, just a slow shift in the air, the kind that made the windows fog up in the morning and caused Hope and Ray to press their fingers to the glass and draw crooked hearts in the mist. Inside the mansion, warmth didn't come just from the central heating or the fireplace that crackled in the evenings. It came from things harder to define. The sound of soft music while Emily cooked dinner, the way Ray climbed into Logan's lap without being asked, the whisper of story time drifting down the hallway. One evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Logan found Emily in the study staring at a blank page in her notebook. "Writer's block?" he asked softly. She nodded. "The last book. I want it to feel like closure, but I don't know how to end it." He walked over and sat beside her. "Maybe it's not about how it ends," he said. "Maybe it's about what remains after." She looked at him. "What's remained for you?" He thought for a moment. "Kindness," he said finally. "And the way you never gave up, even when you thought you had." Emily reached out and touched his hand. Their connection was no longer fragile. It was rooted, weathered by storm and shadow, but still standing. Days passed. The twins grew bolder. They started asking questions about where they came from, about why their mother sometimes looked sad when it rained. Emily answered honestly, gently. "Sometimes grown-ups have to make very hard choices," she told them one afternoon. "But I never stopped loving you. Not for a second." Ray tilted his head. "Even when you were gone?" She nodded. "Especially then." Hope looked up. "But you came back." "I did. And now you're home," Ray added, snuggling into her side. Emily smiled. "Yes, now I'm home." Later that night, Logan watched her from the hallway as she tucked them in. He didn't speak, didn't interrupt. He just listened as she whispered lullabies and smoothed their blankets. Afterward, she found him in the ding kitchen. "You heard?" He nodded. "You were perfect." "No, just honest, that's all they need." The next day, Logan received a call. A non-profit organization had heard about Emily's book and wanted to partner on a literacy and trauma recovery program for shelters. He met with them, quietly, carefully. When he returned home, he handed Emily the proposal. "What is this?" she asked, scanning the pages. "Your voice," he said, "reaching more than just this house." She looked at him, eyes wide. "You want to build a program?" "I want to build a legacy." She didn't answer. She just hugged him, tight, long, and grateful. That night, they celebrated with warm cocoa, extra marshmallows, and a movie that none of them watched to the end. Because halfway through, the twins were asleep, and Emily's head was on Logan's shoulder, and all was well. The foundation was named quietly, without press releases or parties. They called it the Quiet Light Initiative. Its purpose was simple: to bring books, storytelling, and emotional support to shelters housing survivors of abuse. Emily's books served as the anchor, but it wasn't just her stories that mattered, it was her journey. Her name carried more than authorship now. It carried lived truth, quiet resilience, and the echo of a voice that had once whispered to the dark, "Please, survive." The first shipment of books went to the shelter, where she had once cradled a cloth doll and wept into the rain. The director wrote a letter back. It read, in part, "Sometimes healing comes full circle, not to close a wound, but to show that the scar has strength." Emily cried quietly while reading it at the kitchen counter. Logan didn't say anything. He simply reached across and placed his hand over hers. The twins were growing quickly. Ray had taken to asking endless why questions. "Why is the moon following us? Why do pancakes burn if you love them too much? Hope was more thoughtful. She spent hours sketching in the garden or reading with her feet tucked beneath her on the couch. One rainy afternoon, Emily found her flipping through When Light Found Us. "Do you know it's about you and Ray?" she asked gently. Hope nodded. "And about you and Daddy Logan." Emily paused. "You call him Daddy?" Hope looked confused. "Isn't he?" Emily blinked back emotion. "He is." Later that night, she told Logan what Hope had said. He smiled. "She doesn't need permission. She knows." The topic came up again weeks later when Logan returned from a short business trip. Ray ran into the foyer yelling, "Daddy's back!" Emily stood by the door, heart tight in her chest. Logan picked Ray up and hugged him. "You missed me?" Ray nodded. "We saved you cookies." "And Hope?" She made a card with glitter. Hope peeked from behind Emily's leg, holding out the card shyly. Logan crouched down and opened it. Inside was a drawing, the four of them standing under a big tree with stars in the sky. A crooked heart above their heads. Underneath, in messy, careful handwriting, it read, "My family." He looked up. Emily was watching him. "She drew it herself," she whispered. Logan pulled her into a hug, one arm still around Ray. "Yeah," he murmured, voice thick. "She really did." That weekend, the four of them drove out of the city to a cabin in the woods, not for nostalgia but for presence, for stillness, for something that felt like cleansing. It was the same forest road where everything had begun. They passed the old twisted tree where Emily had once knelt, rain pouring, heartbreaking. She looked out the window. Hope was asleep in the back seat. Ray hummed softly. Logan glanced at her. "You okay?" She nodded. "I was afraid this road would haunt me forever. And now? Now it's just part of the map." They spent the weekend playing board games, roasting marshmallows, and watching the sky darken with more stars than the city ever allowed on. The last night, Logan found Emily sitting alone on the back porch. She was staring up at the sky. "I used to pray that someone would find them," she said softly. "I thought if they survived, and that would be enough. But now I know they weren't just supposed to survive." Logan waited. "They were meant to live," she finished. He sat beside her. "You too." She looked at him, then leaned her head on his shoulder. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. Spring returned like an old friend. The trees in the garden budded with fresh leaves, and sunlight filtered through the curtains like golden dust. The air smelled of new earth and lavender soap. Inside the mansion, life didn't just move forward, it bloomed. Emily stood in the kitchen, humming softly as she flipped pancakes. Ray sat at the table, wearing a crown made of cereal boxes and duct tape. Hope was beside him, carefully drawing a map of everywhere we've been, which mostly consisted of scribbled hearts and stars. Logan entered the room in a t-shirt and sweatpants, rare for him, rubbing his eyes and smiling sleepily. "You look like you finally joined the living," Emily teased. He leaned against the counter and kissed her cheek. "I was up late. Final review for the Foundation's next chapter. They're adding literacy programs to 4 more cities." She turned, spatula in hand. "That's amazing." "You're amazing." She shook her head, but her smile said, "Thank you." Later that afternoon, while the kids played outside chasing dandelion puffs, Emily and Logan sat under the pear tree in the garden. The same tree from the twins' 3rd birthday. The same tree where Logan had once watched her from a distance, unsure if she was staying. Now she was rooted here, like the tree itself. "I finished it," she said, handing him a fresh manuscript. "The last book?" She nodded. He opened it. The title page read, "The House That Learned to Laugh." By Emily Rowan. He turned to the dedication. It said simply, "To the stars who found me, and to the man who made space for us to shine." Logan swallowed hard. "I'm proud of you," he said, voice rough. "I'm proud of us," she replied. That evening, as dusk crept in and the twins piled onto the couch for bedtime stories, Emily read the opening chapter aloud. It was about a house, quiet, aching, that was slowly filled with footsteps, giggles, tiny messes, and second chances. As her voice wrapped around the words, Logan watched her. She wasn't the same woman he had seen in the woods that night, and he wasn't the same man who had once driven aimlessly through the storm. They had built something new, something real, something that could survive. When the kids were finally asleep, Emily and Logan sat on the back porch. The sky above them stretched wide and scattered with stars. "It's strange," she said. "I used to think my story ended the night I left them, that everything after was just surviving. And now?" he asked. "Now, I know the story started." That night, he looked up at the sky. "You ever wonder if the past will try to find you again?" Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she shook her head. "I think I've forgiven it." Logan reached over and laced his fingers with hers. "You think they'll remember all this?" She nodded. "Not every detail, but the warmth, the love, the way it felt to be safe. I can live with that." Later that night, with the moon casting soft silver over the garden, Emily returned to the sunroom and placed the finished manuscript in a box beside her first 2 books. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, the house breathing around, her no longer afraid of its own walls. Logan joined her minutes later. He brought tea. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The house, the life, the story, it had all changed. It wasn't perfect, but it was whole. And in that wholeness, they rested. As the world outside spun onward and seasons shifted again, inside this home once haunted by silence, a mother, a father, a daughter, and a son lived, fully, deeply, and together. Sometimes the light you're looking for doesn't come from the sky. Sometimes it comes from the people who choose to stay.